Hey guys, hope you're doing good. Been a minute since I made a video. Just thought I'd do like a little check-in. Um, Everything's going good for me. A lot of stuff's been happening. Life just been really going by fast, and a lot of things in my personal life, but it's all positive, and I'm real grateful for everything I have. It's just been an interesting journey. Um, I wanted to just kind of just touch base and kind of just maybe mull over a couple things, just kind of things coming to my mind. And um, there's just, first of all, there's a lot going on, and it can, it can be a little bit overwhelming. And certain different people are going to handle it differently. Some people are really, really ready for it. They're kind of like primed. They're primed for the change and the things that are happening, and then other people are, you know, not wanting to go forward, not wanting, and actually like actively resisting moving, which is totally natural, honestly, depending on where you're at. And that's kind of was my point of this video, is to kind of show that, or kind of talk about how, you know, there's this spectrum, and everybody is on this like a different angle, a different trajectory. It's kind of like the facets on a diamond, like when a really beautiful diamond has a lot of facets. That's what makes it more valuable, the cut and the way it reflects the light. And everybody's reflecting light at a different angle, if you want to use that analogy, and that's a valuable thing. So I think one of the biggest kind of misconceptions, or you could even call it a block in our society, our system, is that everybody needs to think the same, right? So you got the liberals out there screeching about, something, and they think everybody should be exactly on their wavelength and exactly believe exactly what they believe. And the far right conservatives are doing exactly the same thing. So they're like two completely opposites that are basically thinking exactly the same. They think everybody should think the way they do. They think everything would be better if everything was done the way they wanted it done. And obviously, if you're, a mature person, that's not true. And there's going to be, at certain levels, certain things are appropriate. It's like a small child playing with blocks and toys is totally appropriate. You know, a 24-year-old man doing it, that's they've either got something mentally wrong, or there's like a lot of mental health issues happening. So, kind of like what we're seeing now is this, we're just kind of caught in between that. So I think most people are in between. It's like a bell curve, the the majority is in the middle towards the edges, and then you have just a very small fraction out on the wings. And anyway, I just think it's interesting because it's easy to get caught up in it. I mean, I can get caught up in that stuff too, and start to think, oh yeah, these people are wrong and these people are right. And sometimes it's good just to not engage. It's okay to not engage. I went to work one day, and there something had happened, big news item had happened, and these nurses were asking me what I thought about it, and I said, I just prefer to just not engage. I'm just gonna sit back and not have an opinion. And that's a big challenge, but it's also a sign of, growth, is you're able to not have an opinion. And if you want to bring that down to a more micro level with your own thoughts, this is an option too. Instead of getting sucked in, just don't have an opinion. Oh, I have a thought about this, or I have a thought about that. And I know sometimes there's even an emotional charge that's carried with that thought. And we could just decide, what, I'm gonna observe that. I'm not gonna get emotionally tagged with that. It's hard to do. You know, you get those 2 o'clock in the morning regrets. You know, oh man, I really screwed this up. I really screwed that up. Or I should have done this. I should have done that. And those are the really great opportunities to really just go, oh, you know, I don't have to engage. I can just kind of let myself just observe that and let that thought come. And again, it takes some practice, but this is kind of the goal of meditation. So the goal of meditation would be to be able to just observe. And also, well, because in that observation, right, in that observation, you're connecting to, you know, God's source. And that's the goal, right? That's the goal of this whole thing. So it's so crazy because we've been so manipulated into believing that the goal of life was, you know, do, have, consume. I got that from Gangaji, her book. You know, she talked about how you go from this level of do, have, consume. You know, that's the whole premise of our existence, is to, you know, go out and make things happen. Well, that's important. It is. It's important. But it's not the whole thing. And it's so easy to get caught in that, you know. It doesn't mean you run off and be a monk and go live in a cave, you know. Well, for some, maybe. Some people maybe need that, you know, almost like a detox. But for the average person, we have responsibilities. We can't, you know, have the luxury of going and, you know, going to a monastery and just meditating. I have a family. I have work. I have bills to pay. I have taxes to pay. I have insurance to pay. I have savings that I need to do for my retirement, my kids' college education. I mean, I can't just step off of the, I can't just step out and go, oh, you know, this isn't really jiving for me. I'm gonna go be free somewhere. So the really amazing part about it is you don't have to do that. And I think that there's a misconception in a lot of, you know, religiosity and um, quote unquote spiritual paths that basically say that, you know, money is the root of all evil, or, you know, I have to go off and become a sannyasin and abdicate the world and shave my head and cover myself with ashes. I mean, there's no need to go to extremes like that, right? Because, you know, the the practice that I do, the Sahaj Marg practice, it just means natural path. So it's just natural, right? It's natural. You're a male, you have sexual desires. That's natural. You live in the world, you have to pay your bills. That's natural. You know, you seek companionship, you want to have a family. That's natural. These are all natural things. We don't have to fight it. We don't have to go, oh my God, I just have to, you know, if I could just be celibate, if I could just be whatever, I could, you know, I could achieve enlightenment. I think that's goes along with the other thing. You know, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can have that. I mean, there's a lot of people who, you know, teach like a sexual alchemy, where you know, kind of align that sexuality with the energy systems and use that as a way to expand and to grow your consciousness. So everything can become a way to expand consciousness. You know, that is Sahaj Marg right there. So it's, you know, when I'm looking at things, when I'm listening to people, it's almost like a bell goes off in my head. You know, like I'll be like ding ding ding, that's Sahaj Marg. So they might call their practice something else. They may not call their practice anything. They may not even have a practice per se, but the truth is the truth. And when you hear it, it's, you know, so it's kind of funny because, you know, when you're doing a practice, you know, you always have, it's almost like a gatekeeper type situation. So like, I know when I was doing TM, you know, they said, oh, you know, if you're doing this, don't do anything else. Don't do any other practice, right? Just do TM. Just do TM. It has everything you need. You don't need anything else. And then Sahaj Marg, kind of the same thing. They're saying, well, you know, basically the same thing. If you're doing this practice, you know, you don't need anything else. Well, you have to define what the practice is, right? So if you put strict guidelines and strict restrictions on what the practice is, then yes, it's limited to, that thing. But your whole, if your whole, um, abios, or your whole practice is life, if life becomes the practice, which I believe that is the natural order. So you start doing you can call it Sahaj Marg, you could call it transcendental meditation, you could call it, you know, Christianity or whatever. You're moving in a direction where all of life becomes the abios. The life itself becomes the practice. So when life becomes the practice, there's no confusion in terms of, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? It doesn't mean you're, of course, there's going to be giving into lower tendencies, right? You could give into lust, you could get into porn, you could get into gambling addiction, you could get into drinking alcohol, drugs. But there's a line you can walk where you're not exclusionary to things that aren't, quote unquote, your path. It's kind of like the analogy of, let's say there's a big party and all these different people are invited. Some people fly, some people arrive by train. Some people are getting there with their car. Some people have a chauffeur. Some people are on a moped. Some people walk. You get the idea. Well, our abios, our path is similar. Everybody's path is different. You could all be doing, in almost a cult-like situation where you have this very clearly, strictly defined. I think of Mormonism, for example, or it could be a spiritual practice. Like, you could say Saj Mart is a cult, or you could say TM is a cult, or you could say Christianity is a cult. Anything where you have these more rigid rules, but every person within that group is on their individual abios. And some people are traveling by train, some people are traveling by plane, some people are moving fast, some people are moving slow. It's completely dependent on them. And basically what, as long as the system is being cleansed and cleaned so that it can reveal our truer nature, right? The self-realization, then it's legitimate. Maybe it's ayahuasca. Maybe it's tarot. Maybe there are tools. Maybe it's cannabis. Maybe it's psilocybin. There's a lot of research being done right now with psilocybin, microdosing, things like that. If you're becoming a more original version of yourself, then that's the goal, right? You're accomplishing your goal. The goal is to return to God, to return to source. And what that looks like, or what that is going to change, because our mind is incapable of even knowing what that means. We can have the concept of it. Oh, I'm returning to source. I'm returning to my original template. But our mind isn't really capable of even comprehending that. So that's why we do the practice, because, it's like, there's a prayer, at the 9 p.m. prayer, and Babaji, basically says that, as our faith grows, we will become more, it'll become more evident to us based on our experience. So our experience drives the whole engine. It drives the whole thing. Our experience is what leads us to have deeper faith. And that's the simplicity of it. It's not someone else's experience. It's not, people can tell us things. They can show the way. I mean, the master, the guru, I was thinking about this morning about how, people make the master, the guru, the centerpiece, but they're actually like showing us the way. They're not saying, "Oh, come be me, come be like me." You know, this is where the perversion with, Jesus saying, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." Come through me basically to know God. Well, they're showing you the way to God. It's not come through me. It's come to me and I'm going to show you the way. I'm going to give you a light to the path. And that's what the guru, the master, does. It's a very selfless thing because they've already achieved that level and they're offering that to us. So it's easy to get caught up in all of the trappings of it, right? But it's actually, what is it actually accomplishing? Like, what are we doing here? And I think it's helped me like kind of experience more of the richness of life. Like I'm starting to like realize that, I can enjoy this process. Wow, it's got a good lightning out there. It's supposed to rain today in Texas, so it's kind of a nice little cool day. It's unusual for us, but I guess a lot of the country is really unusually cool right now, which is kind of weird. But anymore, everything's weird, right? Nothing's normal anymore. So it's all about change. It's all about perception. I think it's all about refining our obvious, refining our path. And like I said, that's an individual thing. That's totally individual. We can help each other, we can guide each other, but at the end of the day, it's an individual thing that comes from our own experience. Our own experience drives it, and that's why it is important to have a practice, whether it's what I'm doing or whether it's something else. And I always try to bring my kids back to that idea that their path is special for them, and what I'm doing may be relevant, may not be relevant. People get so bent out of shape if their kids don't do meditation or don't do what they're doing. I don't see that at all. I'm like, it's there, it's an offering. I can help you with that if you want, but at the end of the day, this is your journey, and it's not my journey. So we just, as a parent, you can just try to be supportive. Well, that's what these masters, these gurus, these higher developed beings are actually doing also. They're not saying you got to do it exactly the way I did it. They're saying that they're there to support the way we're doing it. So that's kind of a subtle thing, but there's little subtle things like that that can make our abhyas a little more clean, a little more helpful. What's helped me a lot, I was just going to mention real quick, is Don Oakley. He's a guy that I've kind of got turned on to lately, the last probably year or so. I got a couple of his books. He does a nice little thing every first Tuesday and last Tuesday of the month. He does a little Zoom call, and you can ask questions and comments and stuff like that. And he's very what I'd call enlightened, and but the way that the kind of the path that he's kind of showing is basically using the mind to just observe, be in the presence, and to be in that, be in the now. It's kind of along the lines of Eckhart Tolle, and this guy named Ashanti, but it's Ramana Maharishi teachings, and it's funny because I came across these teachings a long time ago, but I couldn't relate to them at all. But after doing Saj Marg for a few years, this stuff came to me, and I'm like, wow, this is really helpful. For example, like what I've been doing is when I do my meditation now, with Sahaj Marg, you're basically just you're saying, the light of the divine is already in my heart, and I'm receiving the transmission. So you're you're like turning on this like little, it's like turning on a fan that's blowing this transmission towards you, and you're kind of just contemplating the idea that the light of the divine is in your heart. Well, what I've been doing with that is like it's almost like I flip on the switch and then I just sit back and observe. Where before I was trying to go somewhere with my mind, if that makes any sense, and I was trying to like make something happen, make my mind go in a certain direction, and so my abhyas, my practice has changed very subtly because of information I got from outside of you know heartfulness, Sahaj Marg, whatever. So my point of all that is if we become very there's a time and a place to be maybe really strict in your practice, because not for someone else but for you, like for your experience. When I first started doing Sahaj Marg, I didn't want to know a lot of information. I just wanted to do the practice. So I did the meditation online from Daji, of course, it's called Heartfulness. And I did the practice like he's prescribed and did the stuff. But I didn't want to read a lot. I didn't want a lot of outside stuff. I just wanted to have my own experience with it. And I think that's very valuable with things because, again, our own experience is what drives our deepening of our faith, deepening of our practice. And so just a couple little things there, throw out there. And so again, kind of to end this, basically, had I started doing the Ramana Maharishi stuff 20 years ago, I mean, I did read a book by Ramana or about Ramana and all that, but I couldn't, like, it didn't make sense. Like, I couldn't understand it the way I do now. And it's almost like it's too simple, and our mind kind of was searching for complexity in a way. But when we start to understand that God is simple, Babaji said, God is simple and can be achieved by equally simple means. It doesn't have to be a complicated practice. It's actually an impediment. The more complicated, the more of an impediment. And honestly, the Don Oakley information is much simpler than anything else. It's the simplest. So anyway, I just thought check in. I hope everybody's doing good, and we'll talk to you later.